Warning! The following video will contain a large amount of me going pew 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 on this episode of Battle Guides featuring Rukyuk. Rukyuk is a ranger who uses his amazing movement as well as his custom ammo tokens to crush his opponents from literally meters away. However, that all comes at the cost of having awkward minimum ranges, having generally meh stats, as well as being easily card locked due to his unique ability and unique base. Rukyuk's unique ability is Custom Ammunition. Long story short, Rukyuk has 6 ammo tokens and may ante one of them during the ante phase. If he does not ante an ammo token, his attacks don't hit opponents this beat. Now, he can't regain these ammo tokens except for reloading, which is his unique base. Note that if there's any effect that negates the effect of the token, such as Lixis with her naturalizing style, his attacks can still hit the opponents because yes, you still anteed the token. Its effect was just negated. Now let's move on to the ammo tokens. Each of Rukyuk's ammo tokens gives him a specific stat or bonus that he applies to his attack during the beat on the turn it is anteed. Now let's start off with Explosive Shot. It gives Rukyuk power plus 2, which is great on a character who has a myriad of power plus 0s and power plus 1s. This is really powerful because, in essence, it brings any attack he plays into above magical power range, and in fact, can make almost any attack a big payout attack. If Rukyuk has this ammo token in his pool, it's very dangerous for the opponent. Next up is arguably my favorite token, which is the Long Shot token, which basically gives Rukyuk -1 minimum range and +1 maximum range. Now, the -1 minimum range is crucial because Rukyuk has a lot of minimum range, and you'll see that later on. And this serves as a great way of correcting your positioning. If your opponent is hugging the center of the board, or is generally near you and you can't get away for some reason, this token makes it so that your attacks that originally shouldn't be able to hit, can hit. And that's very crucial for Rukyuk because you don't want to waste turns missing. Next up is the AP Shell. The AP Shell, or Armor Piercing Shell, ignores Soak. And that's not necessarily the best thing because not a lot of characters do have Soak. But specific characters who do use Soak, like Cadenza, or maybe somebody like Lord Eustace, rely on their Soak generally a lot in forms of pseudo stun guard. So if you are able to negate their stun immunity or their ability to not be stunned by ignoring their Soak, it's very good. However, most of the time you'll use this to discard for the multiple effects that you can get from your styles by discarding a token. Needless to say, it's good in the matchups where you can ignore Soak, but in the matches where you can't ignore Soak, you can just toss this away as a free discard on any of your styles. Next up is Swift Shell, which is arguably the second most important thing about Rukyuk's ammo tokens. This one gives him priority plus 2, and that's very powerful because, again, he's a character who's not exactly very slow. He has a lot of plus 0s, but he does have a few negative priority attacks, and we'll get into those later on. Long story short, this allows Rukyuk to become usually faster than almost any opponent he fights against. And one added thing is that this thing is very good when he needs to get away. A lot of his movement is on after activating, before activating, or any of those things. It's not on start of beat or end of beat, which means that he can barely guarantee it by just anteing this token, because he'll be super fast and he'll be usually faster than anybody else in the cast, and he can dodge and get away and get into the proper positioning. Next up is Flash Shell, and that is super good. It ignores Stun Guard. Arguably, it's better than the Armor Piercing Shell. Now, this one's very powerful because, again, everybody uses Strike and or Shot, and you can basically ignore any form of stun guard people have. So if you're up against a brawler or anything like that, you can oftentimes stun gun them to death by just anteing this and then anteing the power and then going on and on and on with that. The ability to ignore stun guard is very, very useful if you're able to predict your opponent correctly. So use it very well. If you can't, just discard it for your styles. And finally, the third most important token is the Impact Shell. On hit, Rukyuk gets to push the opponent up to 2 spaces. And this is very powerful for a ranger, because you want them to be as far away from you as possible. A lot of opponents who are smart will know that the best way to beat a ranger is to simply hug the center of the board, because at most you'll be at range 3 from them, because the center and each edge is only range 3 from the center. Now, what's the problem with that? A lot of your minimum ranges are like range 3, so if any advance will just utterly destroy you. The impact shell rectifies that by pushing the opponent 2 spaces, meaning that they won't be hugging the center of the board any longer. As an added benefit, if you're already at range and they're already trying to get into the center of the board, you can preemptively play this so that when they do advance with their dash or drive, you can smack them back to the corner. This is very good basically for maintaining the range that Rukyuk wants, and as a ranged character who desperately needs to be at range, this is very, very crucial. Now, this unique ability is very interesting because it's like he's Hikaru, because he has a lot of these like plus stats and plus anything like that. But the other special ammo tokens like the impact shell, the armor piercing shell, the flash shell are very useful because they allow Rukyuk to basically tailor an attack for the job. If you have an opponent who has a lot of stun guard and your grasps are suddenly useless, well, just anti your flash shell and suddenly that grasp becomes really, really useful. Now that's basically the overarching thing about this kind of character. The custom ammo tokens are especially that. They're made to tailor fit your attack for the job you want it to do. And oftentimes, a lot of attacks kind of are bad because they're missing a few stats, or missing the ability to ignore stun guard, or in fact, just don't give you enough positioning advantage. All of the tokens in Rukyuk's kit are some way to rectify that. And this is very important as Rukyuk because making your tokens worth it is one of the most important things you have to do, because you can barely get multiple uses out of the same token. Because in order to gain your tokens back, you have to reload. And reload is a base that just says regain your tokens. It's not an actual attack. So reloading is oftentimes very costly, especially if your opponent predicts you correctly. With this in mind, you want to make each and every single use of a token matter and be very, very, very important. Now, aside from this, Rukyuk can also make use of the anti-bluff. Since every attack that he doesn't anti a token on means that he will just miss by default, it very much pressures the opponent into thinking that you'll be attacking every time you anti a token. However, reload and dash are very viable options for Rukyuk because, again, he's a ranged character and needs the range. So, reload gets him back his tokens and lets him teleport, while dash lets him basically move around and get into the appropriate range. If you anti a token during these times, your opponent might be pressured into thinking that you're trying to be aggressive that turn. Little did they know that you're just repositioning yourself. If you can make your opponents waste resources on a dash and or a reload, you are in the gold. Now let's go on to the styles. First up is Gunner. And Gunner is one of my favorite styles. It used to be really, really good. We actually nerfed this thing because it's just way too good. Now it has range 2 to 4 and a before activating effect that states that if you discard one of your tokens, you can change the range to 1 to 5 instead. In essence, you can discard any token and have it act like long shot. And that's very good because earlier I already told you that long shot is amazing for correcting your range. And this is really good because a minimum range of +1 is really, really good on Rukyuk because if you're in melee range against your opponent, you're asking for a death wish. So range 2 is reasonable to ask for yourself. Note that after activating, you can also reposition, and this is a very good thing because again, as Rukyuk, you want to hit and then reposition so that you're always far away from the opponent. Well, not always, because sometimes you want to be near, but oftentimes, being far away is the way to go. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, this pairs very well with Grasp, because Grasp allows you to move the opponent farther away from you and then retreat, which is very, very, very good because of Grasp's added big priority, which means that it can almost always get this attack off right away. Of course, you can help it by just antiing the appropriate custom ammo tokens. And it also pairs very well with Strike. This will be a recurring theme with Rukyuk because Strike and Grasp are usually not that good because of their lack of a hit confirm. However, Rukyuk's entire kit is literally just hit confirmed. So, Strike gets a lot of use here because not only does Gunner give it the range it needs to become nearly full board, Strike's Stun Guard 5 just synergizes so well with Gunner's lack of any significant stats. Not only this, but if you do anti your long shot and then discard another token, you'll have full board range no matter what. And a full board range Strike is really scary. Next up is Point Blank. Point Blank is literally what it says. It's point blank. It's Rukyuk's only style that doesn't have minimum range. Aside from this, it has a decent amount of Stun Guard too, and the added benefit of pushing the opponent up to 2 spaces. Remember what I said about Impact Shell? It applies to this as well. Now this goes along with Rukyuk's theme. He hits the opponent and then repositions to be far away from them. Gunner did that. This does that as well. Point Blank is very powerful because a lot of opponents expect Rukyuk to just immediately lose when he's in melee range. Well, Point Blank is a way to basically not lose when you're in melee range. Now that being said, your opponent can still burst and what have you, but it's still a very good attack. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Shot because it synergizes well with the Stun Guard 2. And unlike many characters, Rukyuk doesn't care about wasting his shot because literally almost every attack he plays is like a shot. It also pairs very well with Drive because it's basically a range 1 to 4 attack, which is very good. And it allows you to get in on your opponents who may be skirting around range 1 to 2 to 3, which are oftentimes outside of your minimum range. And then it allows you to push them all the way to range 4. Because the way it works is that if you only advance enough so that you're at range 2, you can hit them and then push them back 2 extra spaces. This creates an effective gap between you two of range 4, and that's very, very good for Rukyuk, who loves opponents who are at range 4 and above. Next up is Trick. Trick is called that way because you're expecting Rukyuk to be this fast, agile character, but all in all, Trick just makes him stun immune. And then he'll just basically do whatever the heck he wants. Trick is very powerful because it basically has not so much minimum range and some decent maximum range, but the stun immunity is the biggest benefit here, ensuring that Rukyuk gets to do whatever the heck it is on his base. See, some bases might not seem very useful to have stun immunity on, like why would I need stun immunity on Strike, so on and so forth. However, his unique base Reload has a very powerful after activating effect that allows Rukyuk to basically teleport anywhere on the board. And that is very powerful because as Rukyuk, you want to be as far away from the opponent as possible. Doing a trick ensures that that will happen 100% of the time. And sometimes that extra positioning advantage you get is worth it. Otherwise, Trick is just a great way to ignore those pesky fast characters who keep coming at you so much. Now this attack pairs very well with Strike. Now, it might not make a lot of sense since Strike already has the Stun Guard 5, but the power is very important on Strike. If your opponent doesn't have a lot of forward movement and if you anti the explosive shell, you basically wreck your opponent because it'll deal 6 damage to them. Otherwise, you can just anti the long shot in order to guarantee yourself a range 1 to 5 attack that has stun immunity. It's really, really good. Now, as I said earlier, Reload pairs very well with this attack because it ensures that the after activating effect on Reload will happen and you'll gain the positioning advantage from it. And next up is Sniper. Sniper is very interesting because it has a lot of minimum range, a lot of maximum range, great power and priority, and a great after activating effect which mimics the way Dash works. Now this is a very interesting style that again goes with the theme of hit the opponent and then reposition myself far away from them. Now, when it comes to using this, you'll see that it's very hard to use because your opponent has to be at least range 4 away from you. Again, long shot can help with that, but again, that's still range 3 away from you. Now, this is a very interesting style, and it's one of the hardest styles to use on Rukyuk. Oftentimes, it's what I'd call the payout style on Rukyuk because it has the plus power, and it allows you to basically reposition yourself so that your opponent will never be near you. With this in mind, Sniper's increased priority makes it really hard to dodge, especially if your opponent is not prepared for it and doesn't have a lot of start of beat advanced effects. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this attack with the ever lovely Grasp because it takes advantage of the added priority very well, And the added power +1 makes it very strong. And if you really want, you can also add other custom ammo tokens to make it even more powerful. And on the other hand, it pairs very well with reload. Now this is another attack or style that you can pair with reload very well, because it allows you to basically ensure that your reload is priority 6. And that's very, very good when paired with the Swift Shell that makes it into a priority 8 attack. A priority 8 attack that allows you to teleport. That's kind of like Dash, if not better in some cases. With that in mind, you're able to take the positioning advantage, dodge your opponent, and then regain all of your ammo tokens. If that doesn't sound amazing to you, then you're playing this character wrong. And finally, we have Crossfire. Crossfire has range 2 to 3, power +0, and priority -2 with Soak 2. This makes it a great defensive style and would synergize very well with anything with Stun Guard. And the on-hit effect is very, very potent as well, because you can discard any of your useless tokens and then turn it into power +2. This is another big payout attack. In fact, if you anti your power token and then discard any other token, this will turn this attack into a monstrous power +4. If you can hit your opponent with the attack, it will just ruin their day most of the time. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with Strike, because the range and the negative priority just synergize so well with Strike's lack of range and having of Stun Guard. And it also pairs very well with, you guessed it, Reload. Sometimes your opponent is too fast for you to be able to reliably sniper reload plus Swift token. So sometimes you want to make it so that your opponent just doesn't deal damage to you. This is where Crossfire Reload comes in. Crossfire Reload is very powerful if your opponent doesn't have a lot of power on them. At most, it can make your opponent deal only 1 damage to you, which is very good, but oftentimes you want to use it in the case where your opponent will deal 0 damage to you. And that might not sound like it happens a lot, but trust me, it can and will happen in certain matchups, or if your opponent decides to use a Grasp, which is a very likely thing, especially if they're in melee range from you. And finally, we have Rukyuk's unique base, Reload. Long story short, this is a Prio 4 attack that doesn't hit people, it lets you teleport, and it lets you regain all of your tokens. I've given you guys so many attack pairs with this card, and basically you have to use it in such a way that you can take the most advantage out of it. Use it when your opponent is dashing, use it when your opponent is playing a slow attack and you're able to dodge, or use it to gain the positioning so that your opponent has to slog through at least 2 of your attacks before they get near you. With that in mind, Reload is very, very powerful, but remember, you don't have to have 0 tokens before you reload. That's how a really beginner Rukyuk player loses. If you are a good Rukyuk player, you need to reload at the appropriate times, which means that reload as often as you can, because the positioning advantage and regaining all of your tokens is oftentimes worth it, especially if your opponent misses. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this with both Trick and Sniper for reasons I've already told you. Rukyuk's 2 overdrive finishers are Fully Automatic and Force Grenade. Fully Automatic is a finishing overdrive finisher, which blankly states that it has this thing wherein Rukyuk can repeatedly pew 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 his opponents to death. Basically, you have to keep discarding tokens in order to repeatedly use this attack and keep hitting your opponent. If you do use all of your tokens to make this attack work, you will be able to deal 10 damage, because again, you have to anti the token first before this attack hits. That's very good and very powerful, but again, if you're at 7 health, I highly doubt you'll have that many tokens on you. So it's a very good comeback finisher if you just reload and then hope that this thing hits, but otherwise it's not that good. The second overdrive finisher is Force Grenade. Force Grenade is a melee to mid-range attack that doesn't deal a lot of damage, it isn't very fast, and it isn't affected by your custom ammo tokens either. So what's the use? Number 1, it doesn't need a custom ammo token to hit. Number 2, it puts you at basically maximum range from your opponent. And number 3, it's melee. This is a very interesting overdrive finisher to pick because it basically covers Rukyuk's main weakness, which is anything that is range 1 to 2 from him. So that's very powerful, and this is a very interesting overdrive finisher because it covers a weakness. This is one of the few instances where we'll see this, and it's a very powerful overdrive finisher to pick because the mere fact that you have it means that you're already benefiting from it, because when you're at 7 HP, your opponent suddenly gets worried that you have this melee attack that can and will wreck their day. Now remember that none of his custom ammo tokens work on his overdrive finishers, so don't think that you can like buff them up or anything like that. Now when it comes to his special action, Rukyuk really loves cancel, because he's kind of like a brawler, quote and unquote, because he has certain things he can use to counter specific attacks, and it allows him to basically option monger his opponents. If his opponent is using a drive and or something that makes them advance closer to Rukyuk, if you cancel that attack, you're making them waste that option, and now they can't get near you anymore. More pew 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 pew, right? Now, aside from that, his best friend is Pulse, because it basically reads, Rukyuk is now max range from you. Good luck, try to win right now. Because your opponent will at least take 1 to 2 turns to even get back into melee range from you, because you can put in your impact shells, you can put in your point blanks with shot, and suddenly your opponent will wonder, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life, as they sit at the opposite end of the board, getting repeatedly shot at in the face. Now let's go on to the part that everybody loves, Rukyuk advanced strategies and combos. Rukyuk advanced strategies aren't that advanced. It basically boils down to 2 main points. Number 1, it's embodied by his styles, and that it's about hitting and running. Now, a lot of the times a good Rukyuk player will know how to hit and run. It's not just about playing a gunners or playing a sniper and then hitting and then literally running on the same turn. However, that's a very good place to start. If you can time those attacks correctly and hit and run from your opponent in the same turn, that's very good. However, this extends beyond that. You have to learn how to hit on one beat and then run on another. Sometimes your opponent is savvy and won't let you get the most out of your movement. So sometimes as Rukyuk, you have to sacrifice 1 turn and spend it just moving. That's it. Just moving. Now that might not seem like a lot. Why would I want to do that? I don't get to hit the opponent. No. As Rukyuk, every time you get into the correct positioning, that's the equivalent of you winning 2 beats in a row. Because your opponent oftentimes has to spend a lot of resources just to get back into melee range again, which is where you're super weak. So, if your opponent ends up being on the opposite end of the board because of some mediocre movement attack that you played, I consider that a win, no matter what you think about it. So, that's how it boils down to. Run and gun your opponents to death. Now, the second point is a bit more interesting, and it's just that you have to time your reloads correctly. Reloading is a very crucial part to how Rukyuk works, and oftentimes a newbie Rukyuk player will lose because they reload at the worst times possible. Now, when it comes to reloading, you have to remember these few key points. I've given you many attack pairs that contain reload because this is crucial to how Rukyuk plays. Making a great reload is very, very important to how he plays. So when you reload, you have to either A, get great positioning advantage, which is what using trick reload is for, B, dodge the opponent, which is what sniper reload is for, or C, avoid as much damage from the opponent if you can by soaking it up, which is what crossfire reload is for. These are all the cases where you want to use reload to begin with. You want to either A, get the great positioning out of it, B, dodge the opponent, or C, just minimize the amount of damage you take anyway. And this is all very good because you can basically regain all of your tokens, which is your life and blood, because if you don't have tokens, you can't hit. And that absolutely is terrible. Now let's move on to some Rukyuk combos. First up is Gunner Strike, and that's very powerful. Near full board range strike, nothing, amazing, super good, and it lets you reposition afterwards. Need I say more? Next up is Sniper Reload. Sniper Reload might not seem like the best thing to do as Rukyuk. Why the heck would you want to do this attack? It doesn't deal damage. No. Sniper Reload lets you free dodge anything. Almost anything in the game. Because nothing is as fast as 8 priority. Because Sniper Reload plus Swift token means that you have a priority of 8. Now why would you want to waste a Swift token on a reload, you might ask? Because you get it back at the end of the beat anyway. So you technically spend nothing to get everything, which is a dodge and all of your other tokens back. Trust me, it's amazing. And finally, we have Point Blank Drive. Point Blank Drive is a change of pace from what the usual Rukyuk attack is. It actually has melee range on it. And that's very powerful because it sometimes your opponents skirt between your minimum and maximum range and you just can't really hit them because they're there in that minimum range of yours. So point blank is a great way to rectify that. The drive is very interesting because you're like, why would I want to get nearer to the opponent? Because sometimes you don't want to take the damage of being slow when using a point blank shot, but at the same time you want to push them away. Again, like I said earlier, if you advance only enough to be at range 2 from them, you can push them back 2 spaces and you'll be effectively at range 4, which is very, very good. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides featuring Rukyuk. If you guys like this video or the character or want to find out more about Level 99 games or the other games they make, check the description out below. You want to join the BattleGUIDES community? Talk to me or any of the other veterans? Check the description out below. If you want to send me an email or a comment or whatever, description down below or comment section down below. Now, you might see that I'm very overly enthusiastic about this character because he was my main in War. He was my tournament legal character main in War, alongside Kadath. So wait until Kadath and you'll see how passionate I am about him. But Rukyuk is one of my favorite characters because again, he embodies this very cool paradigm in this game that involves losing beats. Every beat shouldn't just be about attacking your opponent, attacking your opponent, attacking your opponent. Sometimes, using that time to reposition and gain the positioning advantage can result in you just straight up winning 3 beats in a row. I will not tell you how many times I've gotten to full board range and watched my opponent like drive and dash towards me as they get pushed back and get pelted with pew 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 attacks from Rukyuk, because I will tell you it happens way more often than it should, and it's amazing. Now, nothing much else to say. Don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.